Okay, I want to welcome you to the co-naming of South William Street for the Mill Street Synagogue, Seixas Way. This has been a long project. My name is James Kaplan. I'm the president of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association, and we are basically a consortium of various historical and civic groups here in Lower Manhattan. We were formed about 5 years ago when a number of us believed that the very rich history of Lower Manhattan as it related to the Revolutionary War was not fully appreciated. So our purpose is to name things and to create events that will raise the profile of Lower Manhattan as a historical destination for the Revolutionary War, and also educate people who live, work here in Lower Manhattan and throughout the city about the importance of Lower Manhattan and the New York City in the American Revolution. Our first project was really the Saratoga Yorktown celebration, which we've held now for 5 years up in Trinity Church, in recognition that the two most important generals at the two most important battles, General Gates and Alexander Hamilton, are buried there, although it was never marked before. One of our second projects is Evacuation Day. The Evacuation Day celebration, which is about a block and a half from here, you'll see a sign that says Evacuation Day Plaza. It was there that the American flag was first raised over New York City and therefore the United States at the end of the Revolution, and that was a very important ceremony. It was a holiday here in New York for 150 years until it was discontinued in 1916, but we have revived it. And so this project, the marking of the South William Street, Mill Street Synagogue, Seixas Way, in essence is a continuation of our efforts to educate people and to advise people of very important events that occurred here in Lower Manhattan, of which they may not be aware. I personally became aware of the importance of this area where we're standing, which I consider to be one of the most important in American Jewish history, about 15 years ago, when after I've worked here in Lower Manhattan for 35 years and been a walking tour guide for the Francis Tavern Museum, among other organizations. But I was commissioned by the Shearith Israel League by Ernest Grunebaum, who is here today, who created a walking tour for the 350th anniversary of Congregation Shearith Israel. And I realized in preparing that although I was from a Jewish background and thought I knew a lot about the history of New York, I really didn't know that much about the history of the Jews here, particularly the early history of the Jews. And in fact, what I discovered was that there was a very close and very significant role of the Jewish community in here in New York City during the Revolution. And they were very closely, Rabbi Seixas, the Patriot rabbi, was very closely tied with George Washington. And the Jewish community had a very significant impact on the Patriot cause in the Revolution. And I also believe the American Revolution had a very significant impact on the history of the Jews here in New York. So that I also learned that this spot where we're standing was the site of the first synagogue in North America. Now, like many people, I thought the first synagogue was the Touro Synagogue in Rhode Island, which is still standing. But in reality, the Mill Street Synagogue, which was built right here, really predates by 35 years the Touro Synagogue, and it was a very important in the consecration of the Mill Street Synagogue, which occurred 289 years ago today, on April 8th, was a very important event in Jewish history, American Jewish history. So it was always on my radar screen that we should do something to name this site. In fact, I was a tax and estates partner at a law firm that at 125 Broad Street, and there were many more people from a much more religious background than I who were there, particularly young people, and they also didn't seem to know too much about this site or about the American history. And I would sometimes point out to them that this is one of the most important sites in American Jewish history, the first synagogue in North America. And they invariably would say, well, why isn't there a sign? Why isn't it marked? So in a way, I view this ceremony as part of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association's efforts to remedy that situation. Now, for those of you who don't know, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but I've also discovered it takes a village to put up a street sign here in Manhattan. We began with our constituent groups, the constituent groups of the LMHA, the Sons of the Revolution, which run the Francis Tavern Museum, the Veteran Corps of Artillery, the Bowling Green Association, Culture Now, and we then, I went to my temple, the Temple of Universal Judaism, and my Rabbi Ari Friedkis and our president Jonathan Pollock, who was had close relations with the American Sephardi Federation, and Jason Guberman, the executive director, became an enthusiastic supporter of the project. And so then we were told that we had to, in order, the way you get a street sign named in New York is you have to go to the Community Planning Board, and in order to go to the Community Planning Board, you have to get the approval of the adjoining landowners. Well, I discovered that the person who owns the parking garage, which was probably the site of the first synagogue, is Mendy Braun, who is in himself a scholar of Jewish history and matters. So he was very cooperative. He's here, Mr. Braun. And also the owners of 85 Broad Street, the old Goldman Sachs building, which is a very important building in Jewish history, also gave their assent, although we had a little difficulty this morning. But in any event, so with that, we went to the community board, Ambrose Richardson, Abby Suckle of our board, who's done an important map of Lower Manhattan, and made our pitch. It was not, we're somewhat sympathetic, but it was not unanimous. There were a number of people who perhaps quite legitimately thought there are too many of these street co-namings throughout the city, which if you go throughout, you'll see more and more of them. But we were successful first at the Land Use Committee, then at the full board, and then we went to the City Council. Now, Margaret Shin, who's our City Councilman here in Lower Manhattan, has always been a supporter of our activities. She's the Grand Marshal of our July 4th parade, so it was her staff, Marion Guerrera and Pez Rush, who pushed it through the City Council. Then we had the support of, we're very gratified to receive tremendous support from Congregation Shearith Israel, Rabbi Soloveitchik, and also from through Art Piccolo of the Bowling Green Association, who puts menorahs up in at Hanukkah in Bowling Green, of Rabbi Joseph Potosnik, who's the executive director of the New York Board of Rabbis, and Cheryl Beer, who's the of B'nai Zion. So ultimately, here we are. This is the, it was 289 years ago today that the Jewish community here in New York, which consisted probably, New York probably had about 10,000 people and perhaps 500 Jews, held one of the most important ceremonies in the 70 years they've been there, when They dedicated the first synagogue in North America right across the street, and that was with the backing and support of congregations throughout the world. I have to believe that was a very important day for the Jews here in New York, and I would say in the 300 years since then, it's been a very important day, and hopefully this will be a very important day too. So I'm going to turn this over to Ambrose Richardson, who's the vice president of our organization, and also has been 4 times, until recently, the past president of the Sons of the Revolution, who will run the rest of the program, and the various speakers who will tell you more about it. Thank you.